All right, it's another episode of the RSL Random Fan Podcast. I'm a host, Brandt Goebel, joined by
Tyler.
And where's Brennan?
He's coming.
Okay.
He'll be here shortly.
Okay, and we also have the luxury and the great pleasure of joining Vice President of Communications.
That's correct.
Legend.
Whatever that means. Well,
Legend.
All-time knowledge getter.
Myth, the man, Trey Fitzgerald. Thank you for letting us join you here at the stadium to check in on our annual visit with Trey to see how he's going to make things even better for everyone.
I wish I had the power
RSL.
and the control, but thank you. No, it's
We believe in you.
Always good to catch up with you guys, and we can talk about a crazy year, 2024. The seasons get longer, the off seasons get shorter, but there's no shortage of both good and probably more difficult things to talk about.
Yeah, I love that about soccer. Even the offseason, even if you go out early in the playoffs or not make the playoffs, it's not that long in the offseason compared to some other sports where it seems like it's forever.
Or if the playoffs end when you're on an 8-game unbeaten streak.
That's
Yeah,
right.
how does that even happen?
Penalties.
8-game unbeaten streak.
Penalty kick tiebreakers. They've been good to us in the past. They've not been great to us the last
Lately, yeah.
3 years. Austin, Houston, and now Minnesota.
So brutal. So brutal. So what's the biggest takeaway from the year for you, Trey?
I guess, from a 30,000-foot view, I would say implementing a new game model and Pablo having almost a completely new staff and then finishing with 59 points, club record, 2 more than we had in, I think, 2012, scoring 65 goals, which is 8 more than we had in, I think, either 12 or 13. So those are club records. But
Wait, was goal differential the club record too?
No.
Or was that a tie? Or was it one off?
no, it wasn't close.
It was close, though, right?
No, because 2010, we didn't
Oh, yeah,
score
we
very
had
many
such a
goals,
good
but we
defense that
didn't
year.
give up. I think we gave up 20 goals in 30 games.
year,
That was when we had
that's right.
Ramondo, Porchers, and Olave.
Olave.
So I don't know. It was a good year. I think when you look at Open Cup, Leagues Cup, and the playoffs and not advancing effectively past the first game or the first round, that's a disappointment.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There was so much great soccer played. It's hard. It's bittersweet. And, I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's feast or famine when you look at, kind of pre-All-Star and post-All-Star, pre-Chicho suspension, post-Chicho suspension, pre-Leagues Cup, post-Leagues Cup. Selling Gomez obviously changed a lot of dynamics. It's a move that I don't think there's a club in this league or in this world that doesn't make that when you're able to sell a player for 6 times your previous club record.
You almost have to.
But this plays into, kind of the ongoing conversation about, is MLS going to change its calendar? And I've always thought of it from a weather perspective, right? Like
right.
you can't go
Playoffs in the
you can't
cold.
go to an August, May, with all the cold weather markets in MLS, including this one. But one of the things that would benefit from that is then your incoming and outgoing transfers are aligned with kind of the world marketplace, which both us as a club and us as a league are more and more involved in every year. And then you aren't losing an Andres Gomez type of player in the summer, in the middle of the year. You're losing it in that case in the summer, which is in between seasons. So
Is that kind of what Mexico does with their fall, spring?
yeah,
kind of
they
thing?
have a very volatile transfer market, and there's like an
Right.
internal Liga MX free agency system that sees just, I think, a lot more movement than MLS has and
Yeah.
MLS does. But I don't know. These are the fun things to think about, and what does the league need to do to, for that to work? Does it happen pre-World Cup, post-World Cup in 2026?
Is there substance behind that then?
Yeah,
it's a pipe dream.
No, there's been an athletic article that came out a few weeks ago in Sports Business Journal, and it's definitely something the league ownership and what they call the product and strategy committee, they're talking about it.
Okay,
but I just and the funny thing is, now that the league is going to be 30 teams next year with San Diego coming in, you do have warm weather markets that can maybe, through scheduling and having an effective winter break like they do in Germany and parts of Europe, where maybe you can sort of make it work. We're already playing games in February, and
right, the snow.
Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but yeah. I mean, you guys have lived here, right? Like we'll roll out the orange ball in May. We don't care. Like that's just part of. So what has to happen some years.
Seems like that might be a disadvantage for the warm weather teams if they have to play a lot of home games in the winter, and then they get stuck with more road games at the end of the season where that's a really important part of the season.
But then you play in the league, right?
But also,
yeah.
and this is the flip side that I don't typically think about, but our CSO GM Kurt Schmid brought this up is, if you do change the calendar, then you're not playing in Orlando and Houston and some of these other cities in July and August where it's 95 degrees and 95% humidity, and that affects the product as bad as a 45-degree, snowy, rainy, cold spring or fall, event here. I don't know. There's nothing perfect. We're such a big country. There's so many more time zones involved. That's one of the unique things that when guys come into this league from overseas, they have to adjust to that.
Travel's a big deal.
It's absolutely a big deal. Travel, climate, all that stuff. So
yeah.
So back to RSL, how would you rate the season? It was a good season. We were headed for an incredible season, it seemed like. But how would you?
I don't know. I guess on the whole, I'd probably put it a 7 out of 10. We finished 6th in the Supporter Shield table out of 29 teams. So I believe that's only the second time in the last decade we finished in the top 10. Because I think 2019 we were 6 out of 23 or 24 teams. I think the quality of the league is better now, so that's why I'd put this year over 2019 when we had, I think, 53 points. But it's hard. This league is, very few people remember a year later who won the Supporter Shield. Like if I asked you guys who won Supporter Shield in 22, I can't even answer.
Cincinnati?
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Good job. I think that's right.
Or were they 23?
Because Miami and then Cincinnati.
But, it's easier to rattle off the MLS Cup winners. And we're an American league or a North American league with American culture. And playoffs are a big deal. And so it is disappointing. But, I look back at that Minnesota series. Excuse me. The margins are so thin. You give up one goal in 180 minutes, and the penalty kicks obviously were rough, right? Like Chicho was 2 for 2, which is a good sign for him, especially the way his last 3 or 4 months went. But everybody else was, I think, 3 for 8 on penalties, something like that. And it's so, I've seen stuff online the guys were taking penalty kicks almost every day for the last couple weeks of the season. And as Pablo talked about, you just can't replicate 20,000 people either for or against, that walk from midfield to the 12-yard spot, the antics of the other goalkeeper and the referee, and then your own, And I love penalties, I gotta say. The last couple years with Leagues Cup going straight to penalties after a tie, I think has been fun. And I watched a lot of, but I hate it when it involves us. It just my heart. I am so worried that my heart's going to explode.
Yeah, my heart's beating in my face during penalty kicks. I totally understand.
I can
so
watch
I don't know.
penalty kicks. I can watch penalty kicks at the stadium.
Yeah,
but not on TV.
On TV.
On TV, it's too hard. My wife goes out of the room. She can't handle it. She's like, no, too much. But
what I guess what I was getting, it's just so mental, right? And it's a flip of a coin. It's a lottery. It doesn't mean it's not important. It's, I don't know. People say, well, this is like if deciding a basketball game with a free throw contest. I don't know that's totally accurate.
It's not even close. There's nobody playing defense.
On
a basketball, right? It doesn't hold weight. No.
It's such a cruel way. I would maybe this is me being old school. I would love to go back to golden goal.
I like golden goal.
Yeah,
I always bring that up.
I don't know.
Brandt hates it.
I don't know why it was abolished. I think going away from the extra 30 minutes of OT or extra time, and that's been kind of presented as a player safety issue in recent years. But now we're going to see that in the next couple rounds, or 3 potentially, if it's tied after 90. You go 2 15s and then penalties. So I don't know what the solution is. There's probably not a perfect one, obviously, but golden goal would mean a lot to me because, and look, I don't love the best of 3 either. The best of 3, I think, was created to make sure that every team gets a home playoff game.
That makes the playoffs.
But if you went back to the home and home 180 minutes, you get that, but then that devalues the regular season. Because then your only advantage from being the higher seed is if it does go to penalties, you have it at your place, or it does go to extra time. So it's again, thin margins, no perfect solution. It is a tough thing to have all these FIFA breaks kind of in the middle of the stretch run in the playoffs. So tough. I don't know. But getting back to RSL and your original question, I guess I'm a glass half full guy, so I'd probably say 7 out of 10. If you said 6 out of 10, I wouldn't argue. It's better than average, which I guess would be 5 out of 10. It's not an 8 or a 9. I think certain players had 8 or 9 level seasons. Diego Luna winning the MLS Young Player of the Year award, I think, is a massive accomplishment. It's the type of league recognition we don't usually get.
Yeah, second time in our history, right?
I guess if you count rookie,
Baird, right?
yeah, it's such a different award.
Right.
I mean, what did Corey probably played 400 minutes and scored a couple goals, and that made him a rookie of the year. Okay,
yeah,
I mean Diego played 2,500 minutes and clearly threw us on his back,
especially down the stretch
for long stretches. Yeah. He was an all-star. He did a lot of big things. So I guess against a larger pool of candidates. So.
Because that kid in Miami that took second he's no joke either. Right?
No, I mean he's going to Bournemouth for $15 million now. I guess now that they're eliminated pretty quick. But the interesting thing, if you look at that vote, Diego Gomez in Miami got a lot of the media vote.
Right.
Diego Luna got
players.
Yeah, the player vote was what put him over. He got over 50% of the player vote. So that's, to me, that's the biggest. That's the most credible voting block.
Exactly.
Even coaches and GMs complain about not being able to see enough around the league because of the concurrent kickoffs that we sort of have now through Apple. Fans, media vote is one thing too. Again, I think same issue. Not everybody sees everybody, but the players are able to. They just know, and those are the guys I'm going to roll with. And for Diego Luna to get, I think 53, 56%, something like that of their vote, that's such a huge statement. And Diego's just scratching the surface. I mean, listening to him talk about his growth, Pablo talk about the things that. They kind of put on his shoulders and asked him to embrace and grow, and kind of that roller coaster ride that he went through this year is just so impressive. Couldn't be happier for Diego Luna.
Yeah, it's been an amazing story. His progression, because he was in and out of the lineup a couple times at the start of the season, and by the end it was like, what's Diego going to do tonight?
Yeah,
was one of the biggest questions.
Yeah, right? And so. I don't know. I think. Again, this goes back to a little bit on the game model, and we can talk about Andres and then passing the baton to Dominic, Crooks emerging. Chicho had a great year. He had it all like in the first 2/3, right, of the season, or first half of the season. So Chicho kind of missing out on the score sheet for the final, 10, 12 games of the year is really, really rough. But I don't know. I guess in an alternative universe, if he spreads those 17 goals and 13 assists out over the course of 34 games instead of 23 or whatever it was, we would say that was maybe not a monster year, but an elite year. And at the end of the day, he's been here for 18 months, and he still is. I think he's averaging a goal contribution per game over the course. So I think
that
Pablo
didn't break the record, but it tied it, right?
It tied Sabario's 2012 record of 17 goals in a single season. So, I don't know. Like Chicho, I think he would tell you if he was here today that his season for him was a disappointment. He said at the beginning of the year he wanted 17 goals. He was thinking, okay, in 34 games I can get a goal every other game. And then, but just the way he came out on fire, because there was one point, I think, in late May where we had, I don't know, let's say we had 30 goals. He had scored or assisted on 90% of them. Now, he ended up with 65 at the end of the year for RSL. He had contributed to like 48% of them or whatever it is. So, again, not a bad year, but just feast or famine, Jekyll and Hyde, whatever you want to call it, because, I think it was after June 1st, he only had one goal. That was on July 6th. And he had a couple assists. He had an assist in the playoffs on the Emeka Nelly goal in Minnesota. But I don't know. A lot to build on is the other thing I would say about this year. And that's, again, taking not a 30,000 but like a 90,000 foot view. When you look at the team has gone from 7th to 5th to 3rd in the West the last 3 years, despite being picked like 12th or 14th every year. 14th would be last. Okay. Not next year. San Diego would be the 15th in the West. So, but then points going from, I think we went 47, 50, 59 this year. Like, that's a big jump. That's good progression. But again, and I can't argue if you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, we crashed out in the first round of the playoffs again. So,
well, and that last game we did score 3 goals. To be fair, I mean, we scored 3 goals, and I point that out to people, and they're like, yeah, but they took 2 of them off. Fair. And I really think the one was legit because, Cheng was offside on the initial kick in. Yeah. The second one, I hate that.
Yeah,
rule.
the Crooks one.
I hate if
remember we had a Julio obstruction a couple years ago, and I still, I don't know, like, you can't, even from a camera behind the goal, you can't tell where the goalkeeper's eyes are or are supposed to be.
And it's supposed to be
It's
clear
such
and obvious.
A judgment call. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was losing it. And we debated that way too long.
We've probably benefited once or twice from an obstruction call, and
Yeah, but obstruction, right? And then the same thing happened with Houston, right? There was a guy standing next to the goalkeeper, and the ball went in.
That's
but
right.
Because he didn't dive into him, they didn't call it, right? So I don't know.
You gotta hurry back and get onside, right?
I don't love that rule.
So if we were to ask, always focus on the positive, but is there anything that was disappointing about the season other than the way it ended?
That's a good question. I think, I guess what I would look at is, despite the 59, and look, every team can do this, but you could go back through your schedule and say, oh man, we should have had these points, those points, that. And so when you look at the 0-0 home draw against a rotated Columbus team coming out of CONCACAF, when you look at the 0-0 draw we had in Montreal, you look at the 2-0 home loss to San Jose. To me, those are probably the biggest disappointing games because when was it? Was there another scoreless draw somewhere along the line? I'm blanking right now. But also, like, the home game against L.A. where Chicho crushed his face in, and then we lose that 1-0. Even more disappointing than that, while we're talking about the Galaxy, was having a 2-0 lead at halftime in L.A. Yeah. And look, at halftime I was like, holy crap, we're lucky to be up 2-0 because we should have been down probably 3-0 in the first 10 minutes. Yeah. And then in 96th minute, I think it was Peck, right? Like, just kind of toe poked something in where Zach and Justin and I think it was Bodie was the other center back that day, just not dealing with a ball into the box. 96th minute, he pokes it home, and so you have to settle for 1 instead of 3 there. So, like, there's part of me that would look back at our season and say we could have had 69 points instead of 59, and then you're in the Supporters' Shield race to the end. But again, every team can do that. There were obviously games where we pulled points out of nothing. So we're down 3-0 with 30 minutes left against Dallas. You tie that 3-3 on that last second Palacio goal. You had the Gomez score in Seattle that made it 1-1. After I had already walked off the field and tweeted that the new streak could start, next week. Just crazy stuff like that, right? So you like to think that stuff sort of evens out. At the end of the day, we were 5th overall in the league in points gained from losing position. So again,
nice.
Going down 1-0 for this group and its mentality and its belief in each other, we were still able to come back and get 18 points. So again, that's a positive, not a negative, which you asked for. I'm trying to think, if Dunny were here, he would tell you that Zach and Gavin were both effectively number 2 keepers, and neither was really like a sustainable or a sustained number 1.
Yeah, and when you have 2 keepers, it's almost like you have 0 or half.
Sure,
keeper,
no, it's like a quarterback, right? Like right. if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 0.
But he redeemed himself.
Well, I mean, Zach was amazing down the stretch. What did he? I think he gave up 2 goals in the last 5 games.
Yeah,
450 minutes. And he came up big when asked. And sure, we could sit here and pick apart. Everybody makes mistakes. Again, I think some of the issues in the games where both Zach or Gavin gave up a lot of goals. I mean, it starts at the top. If Chicho or Julio and Diogo or Crooks or Luna or Gomez, if they're not pressing up top, it sets everybody else up for failure. And for me, Emeka and Ojeda are probably like the co-MVPs of this season because they were so immense in those pivots. But there were definitely games, and a couple of the Houston games probably come to mind the most, and that's Hector Herrera really knew how to deal with those guys, and where they look like traffic cones because there's no pressure up top. And then I'm sure we could all sit here and say, oh, Vera screwed this up, or Glad screwed this up, or whichever outside back was playing center back screwed this up. But again, it starts up top, and our best games were the ones where Chicho is leading the press, and everybody are taking their cues off of him, and then we're pinning teams deep in their own end. We're winning the ball in an attacking position and just creating opportunity after opportunity there. And that's where Diego succeeded. That's where Gomez was massively dangerous in just either winning a ball or Crooks winning a ball, playing it out to Gomez, and then Gomez with 13 goals and 9 assists in maybe 20 games. Now,
yeah, and Mark Zook started doing that towards the end of the season as well, right? Especially against Minnesota.
Yeah, and you remember the game against Vancouver. Yeah. He was the one that back pressed, won the ball, played it to Ojeda. He flips a 40-yard diagonal to Luna, and Luna gets the equalizer. So, Dom, to me, and this, look, I love Gomez. It sucks to lose him. It's amazing that we got effectively $13 million for him after a year and a half. But, Dom is so far ahead, I think, in terms of a
tactically,
complete, and look, one of the reasons Dom came here is because he wants us to do for him what we did for Andres. He's not as fast as Andres. Clearly, in the late season, with integrating the new guys, and without Gomez, we had a hard time getting behind back lines. And certainly, when Minnesota is putting 5 in the back, it's hard to break down. You guys remember in our heyday when I think we were unbeaten in 34 straight games here, teams would come in and put 11 behind the ball, and the only thing that really breaks that down is a momentary individual piece of brilliance. And there were games where it was Javi or Will Johnson or somebody would come up with it, but there were plenty of frustrating games where nobody came up with it, and we're walking away 0-0 or 1-1. So I don't know. It's
is that the constant recipe here at Real Salt Lake? Is you come into altitude when you go to Colorado, same thing. You just put your hustle guys out there and hope they can do enough defensively, and we don't get to see some of those skill players at their top level. Does that happen?
I think that might be the recipe for some teams. I think as the league has grown, we're seeing, and the league goes through eras, right? And And when we played the Diamond, it was more of a possession league, and we were the best at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I would say, LAFC, even Miami, maybe Cincinnati, some of the elite teams in this league, they're content to let you have possession and turn it into a transition game. And I think, it's easy to say Diogo did not adjust, right, in 7 games. People said that about Javier Morales in 2007. People said it about Hani Mukhtar in 18 or 19, whatever it was. And then, they have a 7-10 games. They have a preseason camp, and then the light bulb goes off. And so that's what I think we're all hoping for with Diogo. The guy's played 31 Champions League games. He came from playing at a very high level in Portugal and Denmark. He's not a bad player. But this league is faster and more physical and more transition-oriented than he was used to. So it just takes time. Clearly he's got class, and I think Pablo said this publicly. After Chicho, he's the best finisher by far. But he's got to come along in terms of what he's being asked on both sides of the ball and just being used to a lot of the idiosyncrasies of MLS. And so hopefully next year is going to be a big year for him. Clearly, Marchuk actually is how you say his name.
Say it again?
Marchuk. That's the Polish pronunciation. He's demonstrating that he's picking it up quickly. Crooks, again, who I think was an underappreciated and undervalued.
Oh, not in this
player.
podcast.
Okay. Then you guys got it.
Brandt.
I'm pretty sure he still has a signature on his chest from Crooks.
I'm gonna have it tattooed. I am a huge Matt Crooks fan. So.
Yeah, but then it's just about putting it all together, right?
Yeah,
and
that's what we
saw
that's the crazy thing. So,
right?
I don't know. I guess
are the pieces all there then? Is that the idea, or do you think we still need a right back, maybe a goalie, or no? I
think we have the pieces. I also think we did a lot of our winter shopping in the summer, as Matt Doyle just wrote.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to have a CONCACAF game February 10th, maybe, something like that. So I would expect Kurt and Jason and Tony and Pablo to go get probably younger in some areas, maybe, and add depth. And because it's a long grind, right? And nobody, I think, too, if you look back at this year, we did have an injury epidemic at center back.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we were remarkably healthy. I think we had 8 players play 2,000 minutes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we had some really high mileage guys.
I think we had 11 play 1,800 or more. And so across multiple competitions from, basically last year was February 20th to November 3rd or whatever it was, to not have all the nagging hamstring injuries and all that stuff. So, clearly, I don't know. Vera, he did something stupid when he spit and got a 3-game suspension. He did have 2 yellow card suspensions on top of that. There are some people that are like, oh, he's a nightmare. I don't know. A center back getting 8 yellow cards
I don't think
is not
big.
massive,
no.
right?
Back a couple of years, and Marcelo had
Glad did have an ankle injury that cost him 7 games in end of June and most of July. Palacio, I think, had a really bad knee injury. Palacio's injury and Glad's injury, just so everybody knows, were both caused by the same over-aggressive person in training this year. So
who's not on the team anymore, or
don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
We won't have our roster decisions until
It wasn't Brian,
tomorrow,
man.
or
it wasn't Costa Rican Brian.
What a sneaky
it was
little
not
comment.
Costa Rican Brian.
Not Costa Rican Brian.
We miss Brian Oviedo is the kind of player you always want to have in your team. He's a consummate professional.
Yep, absolutely.
He just brings some calm to the team.
He absolutely stepped up playing center back, remember, in Chicago.
That was incredible.
There was a couple other games where him and Bodie were our center backs when Glad was hurt or suspended and Vera was hurt or suspended.
and that's what I said with Brown stepping in, right? Like for a fifth center back, he's killing it.
Yeah,
right?
I think that was part of the attract. Javane was not brought here as a center back, but I think he had played in a back three and played center back in a back four for Vancouver and Jamaica. I mean, he's primarily a right back, but his ability to kind of get thrown in that fire, as we saw against Vancouver in the first game against Minnesota, that's what you got to have. You need guys who are able to maybe be somewhat familiar and embrace those type of challenges that inevitably just get thrown at you.
Yeah, and then Anelli, he just plays anywhere.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Maybe he could play.
It was funny when he got thrown in right back. I remember asking him ahead of the Minnesota game, he's like, look, I haven't played right back since Miami, and this year's system is different than last year's, so I was just kind of going on a lot of muscle memory. But, I think Pablo and the coaches would tell you they could put Emeka anywhere, and he would quickly get it. And the thing that Pablo always told, the Apple folks, or whenever he talked about Emeka publicly, is there is nobody that processes new information more quickly than Emeka. So in a video session, in a training session, or in a game, you can show him something, you can tell him something, and he
just
immediately applies it. So, I mean, guy's an Ivy League product and super
Cornell,
smart
baby.
kid. And I say kid, he's 25, so he's old by MLS standards. But after 2 years in this league, I think we feel really good about giving him that contract extension in August, and hopefully he'll be here for a long time. But Pablo says he should be on the U.S. national team. He should get interest from Europe because he's just that versatile and complete of a player.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
There isn't a lot to be negative about in the season. When you figure we have 59 points, you have a CCC spot now,
Yep.
and then there was one other good thing that I can't remember. I'm getting old. But where do you think the team needs to improve the most? We talked about it a lot. At the beginning of the season, I thought we need a third center back because I didn't think Marcelo would. Great guy, but I thought there was a need there. Is that still the case, or am I right, or are we right?
I guess it depends what you think of Philip Quinton.
Right.
I was impressed by him.
I liked him, but at the same time, for me personally, if I were to say where would be the one place that RSL could really solidify the back line is right back. Because and then the struggles at the goalkeeper. I think you either need to decide which way you're going to go. Are you going to put the kid in and give him the starting role? Do you have to commit to Beavers or whomever it is and say, you know what, you got 15 games. Let's see what we can do. Because I thought the goalkeeper situation kind of made it difficult in the back line. Just watching and kind of trying to
can I
get a feel.
Can
for
I
it.
ask
Go
this?
ahead.
What dictated McMath or Beavers? What was it like? Was it in the training sessions that dictated it, or was it because McMath kind of had the spot? He had a couple blunders, let a couple easy goals go through, and then all of a sudden we're seeing Beavers in the midweek.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was all of a sudden you're seeing Beavers in the midweek, because they talked from the beginning of the year we need to get our 18-year-old keeper, who's now 19, more minutes. And so, the beginning of the year, you're playing roughly once a week. And then starting with Open Cup and May and June, you had a lot of 3-game weeks. And so there was a plan to give Gavin, if the team is going Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Gavin gets the Wednesday game. And then, but as the season goes on and you see what's happening in games and in training sessions, there were other opportunities to give Gavin more games. So Gavin ended up, I think, between Open Cup, Leagues Cup, and MLS played, I think, 15 games out of the team played 39. But it's a constant evaluation at some point. So,
was that the hardest position to come in as a young guy and make a real difference in MLS?
I think that's what a lot of people believe, yeah. Because, clearly I think Justin Glad probably plays differently if he's got a teenager behind him than he's got a 33-year-old behind him.
Yeah, I can see that.
I think if you talk to Pablo, he would say Zach is a good communicator. We don't have a lot of communicators, right? Justin Glad, Brian Vera don't talk a lot. Gavin Beavers, as an 18, 19-year-old, isn't coming in and commanding,
barking,
10 people in front of him. In the pivot, Emeka and Brian are both very quiet, and these are all kind of lead by example guys. So along that spine, you need somebody who's talking. And Pablo's been talking about this for 3 years. Like, we've never really had somebody.
Is that a communication barrier, partly? Because like with the Vera and Glad thing.
Yeah, but everybody
They find
speaks
ways.
soccer Spanish or soccer English, and just because Brian Vera or Brian Ojeda aren't sitting in this room every other Saturday night going through complex emotions in a secondary language doesn't mean they don't understand 80% of the English that's coming their way, especially on the field from their teammates. There's 100 words that everybody knows. So and look, Pablo runs. If you guys come to a training session, Pablo and Hamason are doing a lot of teaching in both English and Spanish. So I don't think the communication thing is that big a deal. Marchuk says he's going to come back speaking only English after his winter in Poland, so that he can do more in English next year, I should say.
Well, we interviewed him for the podcast. He spoke really well.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing.
The
like,
comfort of.
I'm trying to
back and
convince him and Diogo that their English is a lot better than they think it is, and it's very much comes down to how they are in the moment, if they're willing to try.
I mean, have you heard Tyler's Spanish? I mean, come on.
Yeah. I mean, I'll throw that out there. I'll
¿Cómo
talk to them in
estás?
Spanish.
Bien, ¿y tú?
Mi
Bonito.
español es muy pobre. Yeah, I'm really bad at Spanish.
So I don't know. There's a lot of that, and again, I think implementing a new game model with 4 new coaches out of 6 or whatever it was on the staff, and getting
An extra
what was
10
it,
points.
40 points through 24 or 25 games. That's a massive accomplishment, and that just creates such a foundation to build on. And we always talk about depth. Julio started a lot of games. Brody started a lot of games. Quentin started a lot of games, both at center back and right back. Katranis excelled despite not having a break for nearly 2 years. So I think Katranis gave the best answer in our kind of end of season media stuff when asked, about the season. He said, "Yeah, it's a disappointment. We're going home in November. We didn't want to go home till December." And he doesn't want to acknowledge him not having any real break between his European season and this season. But I think he's playing a position where you're asked for the most physical exertion and output out of any in that lineup and in that setup, formation, tactics, model, whatever you want to call it. So, because I don't know how many people realize this. I feel like online I'm taking crazy pills. But
They don't know how much they
whenever
run.
we have the ball, we played in a back 3.
Yeah.
It was Vera, Glad, and then whoever was on the right.
back, yeah.
Because Katranis, as soon as we have the ball, he's bombing 90 yards up the left. He's a wing. Diego Luna is not a winger, even though on the starting graphic when we're in a defensive
shows
formation, he's shaded left. Yeah. We play with 2 pivots and then 2 10s. Luna and Crooks are the 10s, or Diogo, if he's in there and one of those guys isn't. And clearly the right wing is always the right wing, and whoever the right back is generally stays at home. And that's why Brody ended up being a bigger asset as a backup left back than a starting right back, because then you can take advantage of his engine and his ability to get forward. But he's a right-footed player playing on the left side, and that's something Pablo has said repeatedly he kind of wants to get away from, is having all these right-footed guys on the left side. So, look, I think Katranis is going to have a massive year next year. He had a massive year this year. Like some of that game-winning goal he had in Philadelphia, some of his other goals, and
That surprise goal that was just a cross in.
That one in Vancouver, yeah.
No,
It was a shot.
He was lobbing the back.
He put up a prayer.
I do that all the time.
Well, no,
And,
he's really changed RSL, because before that nobody played that high on the left side. I mean, he was camping on the midline pretty much the whole game until we got defensive. I mean, he puts in a lot of miles like Ojeda.
And that's literally like the primary, I think, tactic of the new game model was to get numbers forward and to have somebody like him that triggers what Luna does, what Crooks does, where the pivots are, and how to kind of keep that high press. And even if you lose the ball, you're going to get it back quickly and create another attacking opportunity.
Well, has Pablo said, I don't know if we've asked this question already, but has Pablo said that going into this offseason that they are going to change slightly tactically with their positioning and their formations? Or are we
Why would he say that?
To you, behind closed doors?
No.
No?
I mean, we just had the first 39 games under a new game model where you set a points record and you set a goals record. I don't know why they would change it.
Well, I mean, just with the addition, so like Cotranis was one of them. Like adding in Cotranis, nobody would have expected our tactic to change that way.
No, but he was recruited here specifically to
for
fit that game.
Oh yeah, see that's where I'm.
That game model was implemented when Nate Miller and Anthony Poulos were hired last December.
Okay.
They said this is how we want to play, and then they went out and got Cotranis to play that left outside wingback position. They went and got Crooks to be a 10 because Middlesbrough played a very similar fashion. Now, Crooks will tell you he's just. Even though he's in a 10 position, he's playing like a 6 or an 8 very high up the field. Mm-hmm. Now we get Pablo Ruiz back next year. Where does he fit in? Because he's always been, lined up as a 6 or an 8, but he's kind of a deep lying 10, right? And there's nobody that can hit some of those diagonals the way he can except maybe Vera, who's a center back. So I think we're
started hitting a few, right?
Yeah, no, Palacio was the best passer out of him and Ojeda and Emeka. Palacio had the highest passing percentage, both short and long range. So
do we go triple pivot?
I think you're giving up some goals if you do that. But
well, that kind of goes back to Brennan's questions about formation with the new player. How does Diogo? How does Chicho? How does Crooks? How does Luna?
Well,
how do all of these players get on the pitch at the same time?
I mean,
or do they?
I mean, when we brought everybody in August. And if you're assuming health, you've got 8 guys for 4 positions, or 7.
Well, and also if we went farther in Leagues Cup and all that, I think we would need that, right? I mean,
100%.
But my biggest concern for the whole season, not the whole season, towards the end of the season, was Diogo, because seeing his last name, it was like, oh my gosh, I've played him on FIFA so many times, like I know this guy. This guy's humongous. And seeing what he could attributed to the games, it did feel like he didn't know or wasn't acclimating to what we were doing in a high level.
It was slow, yeah. I mean, we talked about this a minute ago. Like, they said the same thing about Javi Morales. Right. Jason Christ wanted to cut Javi Morales after his first 7 games with RSL.
Oh, that's cool.
And
great.
And Garth Lagerway said, "No, we're going to bring him back. He's going to go through a preseason. Like, it takes time to adjust."
Well, he was one of 3 Argentines we brought in at that time, and at the time we were all like, "He's the worst. He's not even hanging with Andy Williams."
The most, I think, the best comp for Diogo is Hani Mukhtar. Hani Mukhtar was not good his first year in MLS.
Yeah,
not Johnny Menendez.
Came from the same. It's a whole nother issue.
Johnny Menendez, quit breaking my heart.
Diogo and Hani came from the same league, so that there's a real true comp there. But he was not good his first 20 games in Columbus, and then he adjusted to the league. And what we were talking about earlier is this league is much faster, more physical, and more transitional than what those guys are used to playing in Copenhagen or Brøndby or anywhere.
It's almost like they have more space to create. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're less physical.
It's just a less frantic game.
Yeah.
It's much more tactical. And
that's what you're taught here as a kid, right?
Diogo's got incredible class with the ball. He's a phenomenal finisher. Probably only Chicho is in the conversation with him in terms of being able to finish. But he was in and out of the lineup. He's adapting not just to the game model, but to the league and the physicality and all that stuff. It just took time. Like I mean, he's clearly got the pedigree to succeed, and I would expect him coming back in. When guys report on January 5th or whatever, we'll find out our CONCACAF draw on December 10th, and that'll dictate the calendar in 2025. But I would expect big things from him this year.
we talked about. Tyler was a big Johnny Menendez fan, and we like to give him a hard
No, I
time.
think we all were.
I thought Johnny was going to kill it in this league, man.
But it seems like he couldn't adjust to the physicality and all the
Constant pressure.
the way the game is played here. There could have been other stuff that's
Sure.
but that seems to be when I look at Diogo's like, is he going to go that way or is he going to finally adjust? But what does the offseason look like? Does Doyle have it right to where not expecting a lot of movement, or maybe not on the top end, but are we going to see maybe some long-time players?
I think we saw such a shakeup in the summer. I wouldn't expect as much, but yeah, I mean, there's some guys that are out of contract. The club is deciding right now, and maybe we have an announcement tomorrow. Maybe it's Monday of whose options are picked up and whose are declined. I do think, with CONCACAF starting so early, maybe you do bring back guys that are familiar just for continuity's sake. But I do think we're going to get younger and deeper at some spots probably too. So, it's all about what is the proper way to utilize those funds that you got from Gomez and Baraja sales.
So what's the mentality of that?
Garth Lagerwey, sold $50 million worth of players in the summer in Atlanta, but there's not a way to use it, right?
Yeah.
I know he told the league, like, I would love to be able to go buy 10 players at $5 million each, and that's how I can make my team better.
Yeah.
And that mechanism doesn't exist. You guys may have noticed there's been a huge push towards roster transparency, and so teams are picking either the 3DP plus 3U22 model or 2DP 4U22 model, which is what RSL has chosen.
Right.
And then that triggers some extra discretionary income to use in your TAM setup. So I think our roster, for the back half of this year was 2 DPs, so that's Chicho and Diogo. 4 U22s, which is Palacio, Ojeda, Luna, and Marchuk, who replaced Gomez as a U22. And then I think we had 8 TAM players, which was surprising to me. I would not have said we have 8. So Crooks, Glad, Julio, and then even a Rubio Rubin who's been on loan to Liga MX. I said Glad.
He said
Okay,
Glad.
so
Those guys are all TAM, and there's others. So
Is
Tam-
Lachlan Brook on that? Or
no,
Okay.
no.
TAM is the players that are above a level that you buy down. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, you can buy down a DP with TAM, but TAM are basically the guys that sit between your max salary, which is, I think this past year was like $687,000, and whatever the DP threshold is, which is, I think, was 1.3 or something like that. So,
Vera is also part of the TAM, right?
yeah, he would be TAM. And again, it comes down to how do you amortize the transfer fees over a number of years. I think Ojeda will age out of the U22 in another 2 seasons, maybe.
Because
But
you get a bonus season, right?
you're able to kind of grandfather guys, and again, it depends on how the contract is set up, and what's guaranteed, what's not. If you pay a full transfer fee up front, or if you amortize it over a number of years. I'm not going to pretend I know all this. I just have to. And it's changed a lot.
always
The league
changes,
is trying to
yeah.
be more transparent, which I think is a huge step in the right direction, because they were so shady for so long about all this stuff.
Make up new rules after they.
Yeah, I
sign
mean, it's
people
if you were the
whatever.
Galaxy or Miami, maybe you had some leeway for things to not make sense. I don't know, just guessing. So I can't project what that's going to look like, next year. But clearly, this club is about winning and development, and the ethos, the mantra that both Jason and Pablo and Kurt and others have said is winning together through development. And so I think when you look at, what did I say? We were 6th out of 29 in the Supporters Shield. I think if you look at those top 8-10 teams in the Supporters Shield this year, top third of the league, no, I don't think anybody was younger than us. in terms of average age. Now, that average age every week gets skewed a little bit. If it's Beavers and Quentin, it skews younger than if it's Zach and Marcelo Silva. But if you have Tommy Silva, Andrew Brody's probably a little older now than you give him credit for because he's just been around forever. Palacio, Ojeda are much younger than even Emeka is in the pivot. Julio spikes your age, contrasting with Crooks or Marchuk or Diogo. Even Diogo's 28 now. So it's going to be interesting. But I think you're going to see us do more deals like we did with Barajas, Gomez. I want Luna to play here as long as Glad has played here, but that's probably not what he wants. And I don't know what the numbers are that make sense to move him on or not. It's not just what we want or he wants.
Right.
If Pochettino says to Diego, hey, you need to start getting European minutes, then maybe we sell him for less than what we think we should or could right now. And so, Palacio, Ojeda, even a Pablo Ruiz, there's a market to sell those guys because Pablo Ruiz is still only 25. But we're not going to sell them or anybody, Gavin included. If somebody, I think in May or June, had said, hey, we'll give you $2 million for Gavin. It's like, no way. Like, that's got to be $5 million. Or, Luna, what's that number? I don't know that market. Kurt is very involved in. He's got a scouting network and relationships with sporting directors all over the world and agents. So he knows that market. And so when we get an offer that makes sense for us, like we did with Gomez, that was an offer you just can't refuse. I think I said it at the top of the pod. Like, there's not a club in the world that refuses a sale that's 6 times your previous highest sale, right? So we had sold Savarino twice for 2.5, bought him back once for 2.5 in between. You pay $250,000 for Barajas, sell him for $4 million 556 minutes later. That's an incredible piece of business. And then 2 weeks later, you get the offer for Gomez. So that's just the world we live in now. I think RSL, as much as it sucks to look back at our season before the Gomez sale and after, and how that affected Chicho, how that affected the bigger group, but nobody begrudged that. And I feel like we've been pretty transparent about this. Of course, we asked Ren for a loan back so that we could sell Gomez, complete the season with him, and have him move over in December or whenever the season's over. They said no. And when they say no, like they want him now and he wants to go now, you can't block that move. No. And everybody's like, oh, you should have made Gomez stay. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Of course, we wanted him here. We're not trying to break up continuity, especially when you're, I think we were 5 points out of the Supporter Shield or something at that time. Now, if you go back and look at those last couple league games and the League's Cup games that Gomez played, like, he had stopped playing defense, right? And that is a non-starter in this game model. You have to have everybody playing both sides of the ball. Maybe the best game we played out of the last 5 or 6 in July and August was the 1-1 at LAFC.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Gomez didn't play that game. He had a yellow card suspension. Mm-hmm. So, and look, none of those things are a big enough sample size to extrapolate, but those are the factors where if his agent is in his head saying, hey, you're going to be going to Europe here in a couple weeks, and he stops doing the things that got him the 13 goals and the 9 assists and the 90 minutes per, like, that's where you got to say, okay, we got to make this move. But the bigger picture is it's pretty amazing that in our 20th season, we're finally participating in a global marketplace. Because this has been the difference between us and, let's say, the Philadelphia and Dallas academies over the last 10 years is we had never sold somebody, some 16-year-old kid that most people have never heard of, to some European team, big or small, for $2 million or $5 million or whatever it is. And so to make both of those moves within a couple weeks of each other is I guess, a proof of concept, right? So I don't know who the next academy kid that we sell is going to be, or the next guy that is on an MLS contract but really succeeding at the Monarchs level. But like those are the conversations. And look, there's going to be guys that take the Justin Glad route too, that sign an MLS deal when they're 16 and play here for 15 years. So it's a mix of everything.
Well, and is that better for fans? I know a lot of fans really just love the guys that want to be here, want to stick around, love Real, like have that tattooed on their heart or whatever.
It's fascinating because like
the business side doesn't really work.
I mean, it's the sport. It's our industry. 95% of clubs in the world, their number one revenue stream is selling players. It's not season tickets. It's not corporate sponsorship. It's not merchandise. It's not media rights. Like none of those things, especially in this sport in our neck of the woods. The Mexican teams make a lot of money off of TV. That's what drives Leagues Cup as well, is Mexican TV money. But for all the teams in the U.S. and Canada, it's selling players. And that's what is going to make the product better, is taking those funds and reinvesting them. And like this comes on the heels of 20 years of building stadiums and 10 years of building academies to the point where they are now outputting a product that, whether it's Barcelona or Real Madrid or Bayern Munich or teams that most people have never heard of, like Rennes isn't a global spender. That was probably one of the record purchases for them over the last, I don't know, I don't follow the French league. Yeah. But, this is where the sport is going. And so could Gavin Beavers be next? Could Diego Luna be next? Could Dominic Marchuk be next? Like, sure. Could Xavier Gozo or Axel Kai or whoever is coming through the pipeline, Jude Wellings, you just never know which player is going to hop on a radar. And look, Jude Wellings has a big advantage over all of his teammates at the academy and Monarchs because he's got an English passport. Mm-hmm. Most people only have an American passport. So it makes it easier for a team to say, oh, we don't have to worry about work visa stuff. We can just bring you in and set you up with our U21s and bring you down the pipeline. And again, I'm speaking hypothetically, but these are the factors that go into all this. And just the fact that, look, to answer your question, when we signed Jordan Allen and Justin Glad to academy deals, I remember turning to Craig Weibel and I said, I hope these guys play for us for 15 years. Now that's me, an American sports fan, born and raised, NBA, NFL. Yep. And Craig Weibel looks at me and he goes, I hope they're gone in 2 years. Because
he's like, I want money.
And that's the way it works. And I think we could look at. Do you remember how agonized everybody was that Richie Ledesma and Sebastian Soto didn't sign a $40,000 a year Monarchs deal?
Right, because they went.
But you just never know. And Ledesma's carved out a great career. Soto's been held back by injuries and horrible agents, and those guys have had very differing careers. And I don't know. We've had guys that have now outgrown Next Pro and gone on loan to USL, and we'll see what happens with those guys. They come back here, a little older, a little more mature, a little more experienced, and able to compete for an MLS job, or do we have to cut ties with them? And it's a mix, right?
Yeah. So Soto at one point, wasn't he getting national team interest?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he almost got a cap or two, or was it the?
I think he was called into some caps.
Okay, yeah, but then never quite got
I would expect Diego Luna to be in the January camp this year.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't have any inside info, but that's just what I would think the progression is going to be.
Based on his, I mean, he's gotten so fit. If you the start of the season to the end of the season, that guy is quicker. He lasts longer. He's his balance is even better. That guy is on the way up.
I mean, I think we forget he turned 21 in September.
Yeah, he's still growing, man. That's crazy.
So, final question for me: what does the RSL communication department do in the off season when you don't have games? What's that look like for you guys?
The first week after the Minnesota penalty kick
fiasco.
Sure, if you want to call it that.
Loss, I guess.
It's not a loss. 8 games unbeaten.
Painful draw. Painful draw.
Yeah.
Painful draw. Okay.
We did all the exit interviews with all the players for both RSL and the Royals, and then we had a press conference with the coach and GM for each team, and we ended up doing that very early last week because Utah BYU was Saturday, and we knew that like Thursday and Friday when the coaches and players are meeting, that we weren't going to get anybody to come out to Harriman or even Sandy, with the Holy War 48 hours away. And that's typically when we do the media stuff, is after the player exit meetings. But we did it after medical stuff, which I think worked out in this case, at least this year, better. Then you have, you're going into an international break. So right now, like our front office, our coaches, and our ownership have had a series of in-person meetings and Zooms to determine who's coming back, whose options are picked up, who's declined. Okay, if we're declining this guy's option, are we going to offer him a Monarchs deal? Are we gonna pick up the option but then send him on loan? So there's just a lot of variables for each individual case, and every one of those decisions has a knock-on effect too, right? On maybe somebody younger or somebody at the academy level, because who is in the U18 group right now that might be on the Monarchs next year, or who do we want to sign to an MLS deal to secure those rights for the next 2, 3, 4 years, and then there's a plan, there's a player pathway plan for each guy that says, okay, we need you to get 1,000 minutes at this position at the Monarchs before we think you're really going to contribute here. But like we saw last year, Emeka came into the year last year slotted as a right back, which he had played in 23, but Palacio missed all of preseason, as did Gomez, because they were with the Colombian Olympic team, which was also playing, in addition to trying to qualify for the Olympics, playing senior national team minutes for Colombia. And so because Palacio missed preseason, Emeka was playing in the pivot next to Ojeda. And then Pablo, after the Miami game, where Palacio started next to Ojeda, and look, that first 45 in Miami, we were starstruck, right? Our guys were just so happy to be on the field with Messi and Suarez that their brains kind of locked up and they weren't playing to the best of their ability. But one of the things Pablo said is, look, for the second game, 3 days later in St. Louis, let's go back to what worked very well all preseason, which was having Ojeda and Emeka next to each other. And then that ended up being, the majority of the season. So you can have the best laid plans now, but there's just a lot of things that can factor. And if somebody comes back, they've each been given, every player's been given a fitness plan, because what Pablo has said is, hey, our first training session on January 10th, this isn't the old MLS where you had 10 weeks of preseason and could get fit. From the time the guys report to the time we play leg 1 of our first CONCACAF series is, I think, maybe 33 days. So guys got to come back fit. So they've all been given a plan to use on their own. And look, the MLS CBA mandates that guys get like 6 weeks off. Doesn't mean they don't take care of themselves.
Right.
But it does mean that, they're not required to be at the facility. They're not, they need time to decompress too. So that's all the stuff that's happening now. Like, for instance, you asked me, like, what is our department doing now? So last Thursday, a week ago today, Diego Luna was named MLS Young Player of the Year. So we're celebrating that. He's still, he's got his personal life where he and his family are going back to El Paso. So they drove, I think, earlier this week, 14 hours or whatever it is, from Salt Lake to El Paso. So we're coordinating with Diego because there's still some like national outlets that want to chat with him. We'll have the roster decisions, like I said, soon. So we'll announce those.
What about community outreach, Trey?
Yeah, there's a ton of community stuff going on, and there's a futsal court dedication that's happening later today. In the 10 days between now and Thanksgiving, our fantastic community department is doing, food drives with the Utah Food Bank, with Thanksgiving Heroes, and there's some other things that I'm sure I'm forgetting about. Honestly, like, I don't think any players are here right now, so it's not It's not like I can say, hey, come see Matt Crooks do this. Like I'm pretty sure Matt
Right.
got back to England within 8 hours after his like exit meeting. And that's the thing. Like,
to his family.
you know, yeah. And now I think the hope is, hey, he's going to move his family back here after Christmas, but we don't know that yet. Like, and those are the types of decisions that all these guys have to make is, you know, my family staying in Ecuador or are we moving to Utah? And it's also a weird thing too, because we've had guys like move their families here in December or January, and then they're gone for most of 6 weeks between preseason and the first couple
They're in
road
Portugal
games of the
or
year.
whatever,
So,
yeah.
you know, every family handles things differently, and we have a great administrative staff that that helps with logistics and player care is what it's called, and all those kinds of things. So, you know, the players all voted on their team awards, so we'll announce those here in the next couple days as well. Like,
You sure you don't want to
who's
announce
your?
it on the podcast?
Well, I don't. We're in a dead heat on both MVP and defensive player of the year. Clearly, Chicho got Golden Boot because that's a statistical award,
Right.
and we already honored Crooks for his humanitarian at the last game. So those are the kinds of things, and then it's okay. We'll shut down for Thanksgiving week. Only because we're not playing, like, you know, because the conference semis and the conference finals are on the weekends each side of Thanksgiving. So I guess that is the one silver lining of us falling out early, is that I could make like Thanksgiving plans with my family in Texas and New Mexico and all that stuff. But we're on call. We're working remotely. Kurt might call me on Monday of Thanksgiving week and say, hey, we just you know, we're signing this player. You need to coordinate with this other club and, you know, figure that stuff out. And then I have to go to, you know, Tyler and the marketing group and say, okay, this is a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 signing or trade. There's MLS like free agency windows. We have an expansion draft for San Diego. So anytime there's a player transaction, like, we involve the marketing group so we can get the graphics and videos if needed. And, you know, we're going to be saying goodbye to some guys that have been part of this club probably for a lot of years. So, you know, we want to do that the right way too, and be respectful and honor, you know, their service to the club. And who knows, like, some of those guys may say, and we've had this happen in the past too, where it's guys like, yeah, I'm going to retire. I'm done. And I want to take 6 months off. And then I want to come back and talk to you guys about coaching or doing this or doing that. And as our club grows with our academy set up, our pre-academy talent ID that Jason Kreis is working on, you know, hopefully Monarchs and MLS Next Pro keep growing closer to a USL level of play. There's going to be more and more opportunities for not just coaches, but other kind of administrative roles on the soccer front office side to take advantage of those guys and their expertise. And, you know, there's often guys that come to me and say, hey, I want to be a media pundit. How does that happen? And I'm like, he's like, what did Brian Dunseth do? Well, Brian did radio. Brian did radio for free for 2 years, and then he basically, I don't know if you guys remember, but when Brian was doing stuff on Fox Soccer Channel, and this is how his relationship with Max Bredos grew, is they would call random international games in like a closet, and, you know, he would drive to and from LA with his dog Nesta to make $900 in a week doing 6 games in 2 or 3 days or whatever.
Yeah. In a box.
With, you know, and like Dunny likes to tell the story, like his first year as a Project 40 player, he made like $12,000 a year. And then his first year after he was retired, he didn't make anything. He had a kid without insurance. It was just a financial nightmare, and that's why he was doing anything and everything. But it gave him the reps where he's now, and look, we're all biased, but I think he's one of Apple's top 2 or 3 guys. And
they're really cool when they come here too. Like, I mean, to just be interacting with random podcasters, like, that's pretty cool.
And now, now look at Dunny. He's got 40 games a year on Apple, which is a very good pay rate for soccer television. He's got a deal now with Turner and TNT to do all the U.S. national team stuff he's been doing, either studio or game or both. So he's like parlayed donating his time to ESPN 700 at Rice Eccles back in 2007 to an amazing career. And so, look, there's other guys, and some guys say, hey, I want to be a scout. And, you have to jump through a lot of hoops with Kurt and the scouts and Pablo to understand the game model and what we're looking for at different positions. And there's just a series of progressions. You don't just start out being a first-team scout. Like, you have to kind of but again, this is where, yes, we've been around 20 years, but we're still very nascent in our life cycle in a lot of ways, because it wasn't that long ago where this club was 30 coaches and players, 50 people in the front office, and one team. And then when we added Monarchs in 15 and added Royals in 18 and then added the academy or moved the academy from Casa Grande here, now we're U16, U18, Monarchs, Royals, RSL. I bet now we're 130 players and coaches, and then the support staff around that just on the soccer side is probably another 70, and then the support staff on the business side is probably 80. And that's not even counting like the part-time folks that we have at the stadium or at Harriman for events, So this thing has grown massively in a short period of time. It still has a Wild Wild West feel in certain ways. I think we're lucky. We have great people all over the organization that it's in our cultural DNA for everybody to help each other out, because there's just things that happen like where we need everybody's help. And, I'll tell a quick story. Like on the team store, I don't know, a couple months ago, there was just a massive need to go through the stuff that Fanatics, which took over the team store for a lot of MLS teams, there's a lot of gear that they didn't take in or want. And so we as a staff had a day where everybody basically volunteered a 4-hour block to come out here to the parking lot in north of the store here at the stadium and go through boxes and identify. And you had to group T-shirts and sweatshirts and Royals new, Royals old, all these different kind of categories of gear. And it was just an amazing team effort. And the club bought us lunch, and but basically you're just trying to wrap your arms around the beast. And like John Kimball, our president, says, the best way to eat an elephant is just one bite at a time. And it's that kind of thing that happens all over the club, whether it's on the community side, whether it's easy to get amped up and do stuff and come support the guys during an open practice or whatever, the day before a game. But we just have great people here that truly care about soccer's place in the community, and it's an evolving thing now. We're for a long time we only sort of competed against Jazz and Utes and Cougars, and we own the summer, and then now you've got hockey, and I think we're all excited to have another pro sport in our community. Ticket prices for Jazz and hockey are very different than RSL, but we compete with them for media attention. We compete with them for corporate partnership and activation. And I think what's happening with our club is also happening in the state of Utah. We still don't have a Fortune 500 company in the state of Utah, but it is growing. Silicon Slopes is growing. The media and digital environments are changing. We're going to have the Olympics here in 9-10 years. Ryan Smith is trying to do this downtown entertainment district. So I think there's a lot of positive momentum, but it's a whirlwind. And so every day is different than the one previous or the one next. And honestly, and you guys have probably heard me say this, what I love about my job is what I am doing today at 9:00 is different than what I'm doing today at 1 or tomorrow. It's just every day is an adventure, and it's all about elevating RSL, the Royals, the club, the sport, and just trying to grow this thing. It's hard. We've accomplished a lot of great things in 20 years, but then it also just feels like we're barely scratching the surface. Yeah. So
Well, I have a question for you. You seem to have the demeanor of you've done everything. Like when we come and do the press and I look over at you, nothing really phases you. Is there anything in your job that really like makes you feel good? Like, like where you kind of get that.
Is there anything we can do to wind you up? Is that what you're trying to
No, I don't mean in a negative way. I mean like, like when you get excited about something, because like when you get a job that's new and you're excited about it, there's certain things that you're really passionate about that uplift you.
It's hard to explain. So it's funny you say this because people remark about how much mellower I am now than I used to be.
Yeah.
And my quick retort is a joke where I basically say, I don't care as much anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's truly it, but I don't live and die with every win or loss. I don't live or die with every positive or negative tweet. But I did that for a long time, and it absolutely like killed me. It burned me out. It ruined my personal life. Like I was so volatile because of things I can't control, right? Which is team performance, which is Deloitte or ownership or decisions that are made at KSL or the Salt Lake Tribune. Like I used to take everything personally, and that's no way to live through life. Like one of the things that John Kimball, when he took over as our interim president in fall of 20, and then Pablo became the permanent head coach in the fall of 21. Those guys are both amazing culture builders, and you've heard Pablo say control the controllables a million times, but that's truly like how he lives his life. And he learned the hard way. If you're listening to Amy Donaldson's KSL podcast, Pablo talks about being 4 years old and seeing his mom with his dead brother, who was an infant that died of SIDS, and how that shaped him, but how he didn't know it shaped him until he's going through therapy after having a bunch of concussions when he was 32 years old. Like and this is why I love Pablo. Like he just has such amazing perspective, but he infuses belief, and he's so genuine and honest. And this is, I'll tell you, like I come in this room, as you mentioned, and some losses or ties hurt more than others, and some wins heal more than others, right? And some ties too, actually. But I don't know, man. Pablo, just on the soccer side of the organization, I think he's built a culture where everybody truly fights for and believes in each other, and that's unique. And what John Kimball has instilled on the business side, and our department, my department is weird in that we kind of sit at the nexus of both, right? The business, like I have 1 foot on the soccer side, 1 foot on the business side, but Kimball's like, look, when the editor at the Salt Lake Tribune makes a decision, or the CEO at Intermountain makes a decision that's either good or bad for us, like they're not doing it to hurt us, and they're not doing it to like. So assume positive intent is one of John's kind of mantras that I've tried to. And I'm an emotional guy. I wear everything on my sleeve usually. And this is where Pablo and I think really work well together, is because he doesn't want me to play games, and he doesn't want to play games. There are teams, there's probably 2/3 of the teams in this league that don't give out injury information, don't share lineups with the Apple broadcasters, and don't try to grow the game. And where Pablo and I see eye to eye is our fans are not dumb. They've never been dumb. Not in 2005, not now. So he could get up there and say, oh, I made this decision for this reason or this reason. But if he's lying or trying to obfuscate the truth, like people can just sense that, right?
Yeah.
People may not be the dyed-in-the-wool soccer tactician that Pablo actually is, and he doesn't talk a lot of tactics publicly because he doesn't want to tip his competitive hand. And I know there's fans that think he's completely and only a vibes guy, but he's actually much deeper than that. But, he lets us see what he lets us see, which is his view of the world, his view of life, his emotional view of what happened in 90 minutes or what's happened over a month or whatever, right? But, like, I think people wanted him to be mad about the Gomez sale. And he's like, it's not my decision. It's out of my control. Like, was I in communication with Kurt and ownership and the agents? Yeah, because he's part of that process. Like, there is a very good alignment we have at the club that a lot of teams don't have, and we haven't always had it, where ownership, front office, coach, and like business leadership are all around the same table several times a week. And so every massive decision, and maybe David Blitzer's not weighing in on every decision, or Ryan Smith, because they trust John Kimball and Pablo Mastroeni and others, Kurt Schmid, but every decision is made with, okay, this is how it affects us on the field. This is how it affects the locker room. This is how it affects next year's season ticket sales. This is how it affects PR. This is how it affects finance. Like, everything is kind of taken into consideration, and it's a really good setup. And it, the other thing, because it wasn't always like this either, is we have people like Tyler or John or Tony Beltran that really do care about the human side of things. And these seasons are long, they're a grind, and we are constantly being reminded to take our time off, to go away on vacation. I mean, I went probably 15 years without ever taking a weekend off during the season because we just weren't equipped to do so. But now, now with RSL and Royals, there's not a weekend where there's not a game here, right? I think we had one bye Saturday where neither team was playing, but we are staffed up to the point where almost anybody in like our 20-person, let's call it, marketing group can take time away and go to a wedding of your friend or go to the birth of a child or a nephew, where honestly, for the 15 out of 20 years at this club, you weren't able to go do that stuff. I mean, we talk about players missing, their children's births or birthdays or whatever. Like, that used to be routine. And it's, again, I wouldn't trade my career for the world, but it's a lot of nights and it's a lot of weekends. So now this time of year where I have a Monday through Friday 9 to 5, Monday morning seems like 2 weeks away from Friday afternoon when there's no game on Saturday. Yeah. It's such a surreal kind of experience. But I guess my point is, I think we're lucky enough to have grown to the point where people can be humans, but also we have a good culture where, Kimball calls it sharpening your saw. You got to get away and refresh, recharge, and kind of be able to get back to a mentality where maybe you're able to be a little more strategic and try to plan. And in our world, it's hard to plan, right? Because the media space, whether it's mainstream media, fan media, social media, it's also reactive, right, to whatever happens on the field or whatever happens, at training or transactionally. It's hard to plan ahead and say, hey, we need to do a Ali Sentnor Rookie of the Year campaign. And, that was easy to think about in April. It was very hard to think about in June. And then it became easy to think about again in August, all because of the way the team was playing, the way she was playing, her national team stuff, the Olympics, whatever. So, there's just a lot of factors that affect our day-to-day. And but, what makes it worth it is you're just surrounded by great people.
And is that why, like, that goal in New England a couple years ago when they slid right in front of you and, like, high-fived you after they scored?
I do remember
it just
that.
meant that much more.
It was insane, right? Because, like, what were we down, 2-0?
And it was, like, 2 degrees.
Yeah, and then we score, we go from 2-1 down to 3-2 up in literally a couple plays. It was Tate Schmidt.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And
the ball was rolling.
Bodie or Brody?
I think Brody, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Brody, and I'm trying to think. We had a newcomer who who played the assist back to, I think. Oh, it was Jasper.
Oh yeah.
Jasper had the assist on the game-winning goal to Tate. Like, those moments are crazy. And replicate that anywhere. And it was such a crazy day, right? Because when the game kicked off, that turf in New England was green, and then at halftime they're shoveling snow, and then in the 94th minute or whatever it was, guys are it was like the game here this year on March 2nd, where you're just dealing with it. And I don't know, but that's why we love sports, right? Is no matter what it says on paper, no matter who's hurt, no matter who the big dog or the underdog is, this is why you play the games, because then something unexpected, obscure, and this is, you guys hear Pablo say it every week, like whatever our plan was, it doesn't matter. It's who steps up in a moment and who bounces back from a mistake they've made once or twice or three times in a game, but figures it out in the 78th minute when it means something different, and they figure it out and it has a different result.
Yeah, and to me, soccer is that more than any other sport. You can't call timeout, get in the guy's ear. You don't get a run plays in every 20 seconds. Like, you can't sub them out, talk to them, and put them back in. Like, you got to figure it out.
Well, and the other thing, too, and I'm fortunate that I get to hear Pablo talk to the Apple broadcasters every Friday morning or afternoon, usually, because this is where he gets super philosophical, but he talks about, like, okay, we got a young team. And if Emeka and Nelly has negative self-talk in the middle of a game, because, again, there's no timeouts, there's not a lot of quality communication maybe coming from the sideline, if he's going to beat himself up for a mistake he made, like, it affects him and it compounds everything the rest of the way. And Pablo talks about this as a player. He had to learn to pump himself up. Okay, you screwed that up, but next time this guy comes to my area, I'm going to do this. And like just trying to anticipate. And I don't know why I use Emeka. Like, Emeka is the best example, according to Pablo, of a guy who you can basically tell him, hey, remember when Hector Herrera comes down this channel to check your back shoulder for, I don't know, Carrasquilla or whatever. And like, he picks that up immediately. And other guys maybe need to be told that 4 or 5 times. But it's so, I guess, refreshing, because we can argue X's and O's all day, every day, and people do it in the NBA, people do it in the NFL. I think you guys and I have talked about this before. I don't know if it's a generational thing. Like, I've been a Denver Broncos fan my whole life, right? They've, fortunately for me, been a pretty well-run organization with consistent success over, really my whole life until about 8 years ago. And now it looks like maybe they finally have good ownership again, a good quarterback, and that makes everything. But I've never once thought I knew more than the coach or more than the GM. But online discourse during basically the entirety of RSL's 20-year existence, there's just a lot of people, whether it's message boards or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, like they all insist that they know more than Pablo or Kurt or Elliot or Pecky or whoever the people have been in the past. And look, I get that the internet is our water cooler for our sport in a way that newspapers never were, don't basically exist anymore. And look, online, digital, everything's changed so much. But I guess that's a hard leap for me, because I've watched 5,000 MLS games in my 27 years in this league, or 29, whatever it is. But Pablo played in 2 World Cups. He's coached 350 games in this league. Like, if you think he's only a vibes guy, that's because he wants you to think he's a vibes guy, and he is a vibes guy. But
go back and watch that. Right?
He's got a tactical. I mean, we even had a Tribune writer last year ask him, fans think you're dumb tactically. What do you think about that? And he's like, what do I think about random people I've never met, opinions, and people that have never come to a training session and never talked to a player and have never. And look, I'm not trying to criticize, because that's part of being a fan, and I never thought the Denver Nuggets were going to be good again in my lifetime, and that hurt me. And I didn't pay attention for a long time. And then Joker comes along, and he's not the prototypical, elite athlete, right? But he's magical if you just watch him, and the way he makes everybody around him better, and the way he elevates his game every year. And I feel like we have people like that at the club. And who knows that Chicho's not going to turn into, Suarez or Benteke next year, or Emeka Anelli isn't going to become Kyle Beckerman over the course of the next 5 years for this club. Like, that's, to your earlier point, very first. This is why we love sports, because you don't know what's going to happen. And yes, we can take information from everything that's happened in the past, but it doesn't predict the future. And maybe it gives us hope, or maybe it gives us skepticism, or it lets us dream, or it lets us be crushed. But it's that emotional roller coaster. And I mean, we've always said sports is the ultimate reality TV, right? And I hate actual reality TV that my girlfriend insists on watching, because it's so like overproduced and contrived. And I'm like, there is not a genuine moment here. It's just, they just throw these random grenades out to get these people to scream at each other, and it like grates on my soul. But I'll watch a Leagues Cup game between two teams that I've never seen play before, just because like we don't get the chance to do that every Saturday because the games are concurrent. So if there's one thing I want to see in 2025, and nobody's asked me, including you guys,
hey, what do you want to see in 2025?
I want to see a Friday night doubleheader, and I want to see Sunday afternoon games, and I want to see Saturdays staggered so that there is MLS or Leagues Cup from 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, like till 10 o'clock at night. You know, so that way, maybe. I don't. So, I mean, Apple had a reason for going 7:30 local when they took over the contract 2 years ago, is because the previous year when MLS was on, Univision, Fox, ESPN,
schedule was
local,
hard to follow.
Exactly. They had, I think they said like over the course of a week, there's like 63 different kick times, and it could be a Thursday night, ESPN. Like, nobody ever knew. There's never been in the 30-year history of this league, or 28 prior to Apple, a destination time slot. So now the goal, the ask is, okay, if we do these kinds of things, whether it's with the weekly schedule, whether it's with the annual calendar, how much does that affect in-stadium attendance? And how much does that matter? Now, we as a team have to worry about it all. And Apple, I think, of course, wants buildings to be full, but that's not their focus. Their focus is viewership. Look, every team, I think, would say, I want a Saturday night 7 o'clock game. And now there are markets in this league, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland especially, I think Montreal and Toronto, they love a Saturday or a Sunday 1 o'clock in the afternoon kickoff. For various reasons, that doesn't work here. Early on, maybe even still, we are so reliant in certain times of year on the youth soccer community that having a Saturday 1 o'clock or even a 3 o'clock, it really hurts.
Coaches and
Sundays are an obvious problem in this market, although not as bad as it once was, because we've spent 20 years building a base and a foundation and a niche, so that if we had a playoff game that we had to sell on 6 days' notice for Sunday afternoon, I think we would have done it. Like we've done it in past years. The games we didn't sell out this year were weeknights during school. We come up with 19,500 in this building when 20,000 is a sellout. We did have a couple, early season bad weather games that finished in the 18s or 19s, which kind of makes sense to me. But we've got a robust season ticket base. Here's something nobody else really knows. We've already sold almost 1,200 new season tickets for next year. Nice. And we're renewing at like a 93% season ticket rate. So despite a slight price hike, which I think was $5 or less per seat per game for 75% of the seats in the stadium, which despite that hike, we're still like the lowest in the league, right? So the value proposition that we have here is very good, and we hadn't, boosted prices for several years for different reasons. But, there's a certain amount of, I guess, trying to be smart, right? And we finished 6th in the Supporters Shield. We were 20th in roster spend. But the roster spend that came out from the Players Association doesn't take into account transfer fees paid. The last 3 or 4 transfer windows, I think we've spent 17, 18 million in fees, actually more than that, 21. That puts us probably top 5 in the league. So There's an ownership commitment to not just spending money, but spending money the right way. There's also a commitment to do right by our fans. Like it would have been easy for us to say, oh my God, we're having a record season, we're spending all this money on players, let's pass it on to the fans, because that seems like what every business is doing right now, is passing whatever the cost is or the tariff is or whatever to the end user. And we've tried to do that, actually, I think, with empathy and sympathy, and just understanding that a lot of things are more expensive, including entertainment. We don't want anybody to feel priced out, but we want to keep delivering not only a great product, but an above average elite product, and that's what I expect for years to come under the Blitzer Smith ownership group.
Okay, last question for me, and it's only because my boys keep hitting me up on Twitter and asking, is Messi coming next
Don't
year?
know. We'll have our schedule, I think, December 13th.
What's your gut say, Trey?
I don't know.
Come
That's
on.
the hope. Like, I'll believe it when I see it.
Right. That's what I say.
I think there's a handful of teams in this league, and we're one of them, that have never – I mean, we had never played Miami till we went there February 21st this year. So, clearly Miami's never been here. I don't know if Messi's going to be on the team next year. I think he is. Like, I think he'll probably play in Miami through the World Cup of 26. I don't know his contract status. I don't know any of the other factors that you see rumored online, but it would be pretty cool to have Messi and Sandy next year. And I think we're all hoping. I think there's probably 5 or 6 teams, mostly in the West, because of the schedule formula the last few years, where Miami hasn't hit every market, hit every city.
Especially at altitude.
Well, the skeptic in me is, send him to Vancouver and Seattle and, L.A., where they can fill 80,000 seat stadiums. We cannot really play, I think, at Rice Eccles or at Lavelle Edwards without massive structural, and we're talking like $3 to $5 million worth of structural commitments for a one-off game, which just doesn't make sense.
Right. To
have a soccer-sized field, to have it be grass, to have all those things. But I can assure you that if he came here, we'd have 22,000 standing room only. It would be the most packed this building has been since Monterey, or I think there was an LAFC game with Zlatan where we had like 21,800 in the building. Fire marshal still probably a little upset about that one, but
sorry, man.
I think everybody around here is keeping the fingers crossed. It's a possibility, and we'll know in, I guess, 3 weeks. So you might want to get your season tickets now in the eventuality, because I would imagine that his inclusion in the schedule could spike some things. So with what is it called, variable pricing, like we see the airlines and others use.
Well, we can't thank you enough, Trey, for meeting with us again. And
Always
chatting
fun
with you.
to
We love
catch up with
talking.
you guys. Yeah, I love seeing you guys around at trainings and at the games and in the press conferences. And I would encourage anybody to that is around. We've never closed a practice, just so you guys know. For 20 years, every training's been open. We do ask media to dip their cameras and not record PKs and stuff like that the day before an Open Cup or a Leagues Cup type game and MLS playoffs. But we try to be as open and accessible as we can. So I know that getting out to Harriman isn't easy for everybody, but we appreciate those who do, like you guys do.
We appreciate you. Us old guys got to stick together. So thank you so much.
Thank you.